Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to Mahamudra for the people. And it's a real pleasure to be here with everybody. Um, let's see, today is Tuesday. Let's take a moment to settle, just for 5 minutes, right? Allowing ourselves to settle into the nature of our mind. And how will we do this? We'll do this through letting our body settle like a mountain, right? So allow yourself to sit, body totally stable, right? Grounded, you could say perhaps an element of earth, right? Stable, immovable. And then letting your breath be very natural, right? No pranayama techniques here. Just let your breath be relaxed. And then kindly show the past the door. Anything that happened before this particular moment, let that go. And then anything that you might be preoccupied with that may arise in the future or may not, similarly, let that die on the vine. And in this present moment, don't worry about what that should be. Just be. Put down any desire to control or make anything happen. Let go of all meaning making. Or some sense that there's something to figure out. And just rest naturally, freely, in the stainless purity of everything that arises through all of your senses. And we'll rest like this for 7 minutes. And slowly bring your awareness back to this group. Hope everyone's doing well. And I just wanted to see, maybe we could see if anybody has any questions to start off with before we jump back into text. And it could be any kind. You can raise your hand, unmute yourself, or some other combination that I can't imagine right now. Okay. Right. So I'm jogging us back just a hair in the text, just so that there's a little bit more flow to pick up from where we left off last. And so again, this is Tilopa's Ganji's Mahamudra. So he's, famously offering this instruction to his student Naropa, and on the practice of Mahamudra. And so I'm going to, so there's this line, hey ho, these phenomena of samsara, which are the causes of meaningless suffering, are created phenomena that have no essence. So look at the meaningful essence. Okay? This phenomena of suffering, which are the cause of meaningless suffering, are created phenomena that have no essence. So look at the meaningful essence. So, with this line, I'm actually going to share a little bit of a story. Last Friday at the Rubin Museum, as part of the Rubin Museum trying to kind of support this effort in setting up a dark retreat center that Dr. Nita and I are working on. They hosted Dr. Nita and Bob Thurman in this conversation on dark retreat. And it was a really nice conversation. And then there was some time for question and answers. And there was somebody who had asked a question that was great. It was, and this person said, if these kinds of practices are so secret, right, and so esoteric, so powerful, why are you talking to this, group of lay people? Maybe you should be, offering this talk to a bunch of monastics who have a lot of training under their belts, right? A lot of Dharma knowledge, Dharma capital, as it were, right? And I was sitting in the first row, like right by Dr. Nita, and I could, watch him, making faces as he was thinking and listening. And, he basically responded by saying this. He was like, when I was born in a yurt, right? And all of my family was around, right? And then all of our animals were outside. So goats and sheep and this like big Tibetan Mastiff dog he told me about last year, horses, everyone living together. In fact, the kids would sleep outside, especially when the kids hit puberty. The boys would have to sleep outside, and all of the the girls would sleep inside. So it was kind of he described this experience as being, we were wild humans with our wild animals, and this was like the way we all lived, right? And in this kind of very traditional nomadic way. It was like, and then at some point, I was sent to a Chinese communist, government school, right, for education, right? And then I was educated, and in all of the things one needs to be educated about, And then he was like, and then I became an imprisoned human, right? And then he went on to say that, just because somebody is ordained, a monastic, for example, it doesn't mean they're free. In fact, it may mean that they're imprisoned Dharma practitioners because everything has been charted out in hyper detail, hyper focus, right? All of the rules, and he was making specific focus to rules, right? in organized religious practice, there are rules, and the rules sometimes take over, and then we become much more interested and tend to prioritize the following of rules rather than the work of getting free. And so, I'm using this little story as a way of describing, kind of breaking open this line a little bit. So these phenomena of samsara, which are the cause of meaningless suffering, are created phenomena that have no essence. So look at the meaningful essence. Right? What is being pointed out here by Naropa is that, we sometimes, in a collaborative, co-created kind of way, create systems of meaning and order. So like, even if you take Bhumisparsha, for example, which is definitely not a place of suffering, there's suffering everywhere. But when groups come together, we come together by, shared values, right? Shared values, we create shared structure. Shared structure creates, role, function, meaning, vision, missions, all of this kind of stuff, right? It's agreed upon. But sometimes in these circumstances, like, these things take over, right? And then they become super real, and we become super real. Oh, I'm this in the organization. I'm that. I hold this role, this function, these values, which, essentially have no real meaning or essence, that, become etched in stone, and they become things around which whole, communities or nation states or societies, etc., function. Right? And so we do this all the time, right? The things we like and don't like. There's this shooting in Kansas City, right? Just a couple of days ago. And, it's kind of, the amazingly sad thing, obviously, the boy was not killed, right? But the amazingly sad thing is that what happened, right, was a person, the person with the firearm, this white man, like, was stuck in their world of value system, of structure, of meaning, of, whatever, right? And, greatly harmed another being, as a result. We, and I'm not saying that we all suffer from the same kind of, racism as this person, right? And projections, but we do this everywhere. Like, stop and, like, look at everything around you and look at, like, meaning, look at value, look at preference, look at, all of these things, right? And so what Naropa is saying is that this stuff, created phenomenon, these ideas we have about everything, they have no essence in and of themselves, right? They have no, they and it's not that everything inherently causes suffering, but they cause suffering when we assign permanent meaning, permanent value, permanent qualities. The only thing that's happening is a whole bunch of appearance, a whole bunch of stuff: visual consciousness, auditory consciousness, olfactory consciousness. And it's not to say, oh, just let everything be that causes harm. All right, but at some point, if we want to get free, we need to be able to crack the nut of, the way we project and reify and then subsequently reinforce meaning, value, etc., upon everything, right? This vast open spaciousness that Naropa, Sraha, Maitrepa, Naropa, Virupa, Kana, all of these people talk about, right, is this direct perception, free of concept, free of labeling, etc. So, here's Naropa saying, hey ho, these phenomena of samsara, which are the cause of meaningless suffering, because it is meaningless. It's so sad. It is so sad that young boy had to go through that devastating trauma. It's also sad that this old man or older man had to go, existed in this world of intense suffering, pain, delusion, of ignorance, of automatically assuming that this young boy was somehow going to, do what to him, right? And there just so happened to be a very similar kind of shooting that wasn't apparently, racially motivated, but this happened in New York State just yesterday, where well, a woman was driving in a car with friends and turned, into the wrong driveway, which happens, right? This happened to me just last week, going upstate and doing that, right? And then this person shot right through their window, their home window, and killed her, just instantaneously, right? Boom. Not thinking, right? But just reacting. Oh, unusual car I don't recognize driving. Boom, So this really kind of like gets to some of the like real life ways, that these play out, especially, meaningless suffering. Right? It is so meaningless. It's harmful for obviously everybody involved, obviously harmful for victims, but then also harmful for the person who is just so caught in their habituation that there's not even any room. There's no room. There's no agency. There's no freedom. There's no space. It's just, and of course, we do this on much smaller levels too. We'll look at somebody who's about to sit next to you on a subway or a bus, right? A whole storyline seems to be created, why they should or why they shouldn't. Oh, yes, you should sit, because I just constructed this whole story why you should sit next to me. Oh, now I'm creating a whole story why you shouldn't, food, etc. And this is why sometimes we find these Mahasiddhas engaging in, unusual activity, like the Mahasiddha Luipa is famous for sitting on the banks of the Ganga eating fish guts, So fishermen would come and they catch their fish and they gut the fish and then they would, take them to market to sell. And Luipa kind of fairly early on, he's very honest with himself, recognized, oh, that's disgusting. And he's like, oh, okay, Luipa, if you think it's gross, this is what you should sustain yourself on. And he became known as, the fish gut eater, right? And of course, we don't need to go to that extreme, but again, like, in the tradition of the Siddhas, there's a very strong push that a lot of these practitioners had upon recognition of their own kind of, hypocrisy, we could even say, right? Or where they need growth, like the growth areas, that then they would lean heavily into ensuring that they grow. So Tilopa goes on to say, if there's transcendence of the entirety of perceiver and precepts, that is the king of views. Right? So transcendence of duality, perceiver, and that was being perceived. This is the king of views. And so we don't have, there's no time for this data analysis, as it were, of color, value, meaning, function, even form. While we were sitting, there's this kind of weird poster on the wall in front of me with words on part of it. And I was trying to just look at the words just as shape with no meaning, right? Not even going so far as to assign language meaning to the word see or water or after, right? That are some of the words on this poster. Just look at them as random appearance, right? So this, if we can let go of the constant data creation, constant, apprehension, apprehending, collecting, cataloging, the way all of this stuff ends up in our mind, and we're just able to let things arise freely. Because again, nothing needs us to project onto it. Like nothing needs, including people, that part, like, we're still trying to figure out, right? But inanimate objects certainly don't, there's like a spray bottle here because we have all these plants. And that spray bottle is not like, oh, please notice me, like, notice how full I am, notice how useful I am, right? It is just there. How weird that I will be like, I must behold you. I behold you, spray bottle, and I love you. And I love all of your constituent parts. And you're such a compassionate thing. Thank you for being in my life. It's like, well, if we did that with every single object, that would be intense. But in a very interesting way, we kind of do, right? And this is what's getting pointed out, right? transcending this whole, spark of creativity, right? This is kind of like how the Bible begins, boom. And there was the word, right? And this is actually kind of true. Like me looking at this, in the direction of this poster, in the beginning was the word, and this happened to me where I saw a word for a moment and I was not taking it in. I was just seeing the shapes of the letters. That's it. But then the moment is the word, boom, there's concept, right? There's ordering principle, there's meaning, etc. He goes on to say, if there's no distraction, that is the king of meditation. Now, this is interesting too, because sometimes we'll the best way to have no distraction is to master shamatha. And while shamatha is a great meditation practice and very important, right? The distraction piece that is being the ultimate non-distraction is resting into the nature of awareness, which is edgeless and timeless, without any location. It is the vastness of everything, right? To be able to rest into that as non-distraction, rather than focusing on just one particular object, or focusing only on our breath, right? Or focusing on thought activity that arises. I don't know if everybody can hear these sirens or something, but I'm in a loud part of our apartment. Okay, good. So, here with no distraction being the king of meditation. Yes, in the beginning of the practice of Mahamudra, we practice shamatha and vipassana. Especially in this kind of like classical hairstyle of presenting this. Right? But the ultimate way of settling into non-distraction is to settle into awareness itself. Right? And the nice thing about that is that awareness has no location. Right? So we don't become myopically obsessed with staring at a candle flame or, our breath. Right? We can just settle into the naturalness of the vast expanse of awareness. There's no deliberate activity. Well, if there is no deliberate activity, that is the king of conduct. So this too is kind of getting back to this point that Dr. Nita was drawing on Friday. If we want to be truly free, then we need to be free of rules, right? We need to be, free of deliberate action. We need to be free of shoulds. Should. Oh, I should be doing this. Oh, I should be making offerings. Oh, I should be this. I should be. Just be. Just do. Just be spontaneous. Just directly apprehend. Just directly experience. Right? Don't collect. Don't have sticky fingers. Don't have sticky eyes, sticky ears, sticky nose. Sticky sensation. Right? If there's a place of hope or fear, if there's no place of hope or fear, the results will manifest. And this too is interesting. Hope and fear. Hope and fear. This is a good homework exercise to. My son is home from school, just said no homework. To feel into when fear arises. Right? Fear and hope. When we sit down to meditate and we're like, oh, I hope this goes well. I hope this is worth my time. Or I'm scared of a potential distraction. Right? Then all we're doing, right, is placating ourselves, right? We're trying to kind of, we're running a hedge fund. We're hedging our bets, right? We're like, we're not actually fully present, right? We are trying to do something. I'm trying to avoid fear. I'm trying to move in a more hopeful direction, a more positive direction. We all know people who are like, I'm a positive person. I just love positivity. And that's when I love talking about Paul and Lama de Soma. It's like, oh, yeah, well, I love intensity. I love this dark goddess. And I hope she ruins your day. I hope she ruins my day too. Just when we get too wrapped up in hope or fear, this, kind of bipolar thing, right? But really look into like fear. Fear is so, fear is a powerful guru, especially when we're just able to recognize, oh, like, fear is happening right now. And it doesn't have to be some kind of crazy dramatic experience. It can be just, a regular run of the mill, experience at a grocery store, for example, where hope and fear arise. So then he goes on to say, when focusing upon an object, it is transcended. The nature of mind becomes clear. Right? So when we're able to, if you're using something in your visual kind of consciousness as a support for, Mahamudra, to gently behold it. And I'm going to ask everyone to just do this, like wherever you are, stop and behold an object. And just let it be without any stickiness. Right? When we're able to just lightly settle our awareness onto a thing without defining, without projecting onto it value, meaning, etc., where it came from, who may have given it to you, then that object becomes free. And because the mind has become clear about it, it's become clear because there's no friction, no busyness, no distraction created by trying to figure that object out. Right? Does that make sense? So this is how we liberate objects, right? We just let them be. This is how we liberate people. Just let them be. Right? This is how we liberate even, especially those things we can't control, like the weather. Oh, it's cloudy outside. Like how crazy am I going to make myself because of these clouds, which, I've never been able to control. And now at this, ripe old age, why do I think now, oh, why is it this way? Right? When you can just let it be, clouds are what they are. Mind becomes clear. We're less fixated on things. We're burning we could say you're burning the candle of awareness, or you're burning the flame of awareness more efficiently, because you're not getting wrapped up in all the little details and wondering, oh, why is it like this? Oh, when's that going to come my way? Blah, 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 blah. So when there is no path to be followed, the path of the Buddhas has been attained. This too is exactly what Dr. Nita was getting at last Friday. When there is no path to be followed, the path of the Buddhas has been attained. All of the rules, all of the, even cosmology systems, how did this come to be? All of the details, all of the, this is the irony of the Vajrayana tradition, is that it's highly structured, and that structure is completely illusory. It's highly structured, and that structure gets you to a place where you don't care about that structure anymore. Right? It's highly structured like a ladder that once you get to the top, it just begins to dissolve and you're floating in space. And so how to be able to hold the path in that way, where we're not, breaking out, holding on to it every moment, like trying to climb a ladder, but your hands are so rigid, right, that you can't even move up to the next rung. So I'm holding on to the path. This is like, sometimes you find these Buddhists who are Buddhist. I am so Buddhist. All is Buddhist, 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 Buddhist. All that other stuff is not Buddhist. I don't want to hang out with those people. That's not good because I practice Dharma. All that is being created is this very, very intense self-reification. Right. And then even within Buddhism, I practice pure kaju. Oh yeah, well, I practice the Gaelic tradition. You want to fight? And then it's like, oh, all of a sudden within this like, Buddhist, tradition, like broad tradition, right, where ahimsa is like a value, people are fighting over doctrinal issues and actually physically fighting. Right? When we make anything too rigid, it promotes this big Reddit energy. Yes. Yeah, when we make anything too rigid, there's usually suffering, around it. Same way when we fall in love with someone. I am in love with you. Nobody better get in the way of this because this is real. This is so real. This is real love. Other things are not real. And then all of a sudden, shortly afterwards, probably jealousy, what that person is looking at you, what's going on? Why aren't they looking at me? Just everything just kind of it goes haywire. you know and it's hard because why? Because of hope and fear, right? Because we want to belong. We want to belong in a path. We want things to be real. The tangibility of all these objects, the main reason why in one way, the main reason why these all exist is to keep me going, to keep this like finely crafted illusion, going. This whole thing is just here for me to be like, I exist. And then I'll die and I'll be in a really bad spot, right? Because I'm using all of this to prop me up. It's like a Ponzi scheme. So then Naropa goes on to say, when there is no object of habituation, unsurpassable enlightenment is attained. This line is like, oh, this is so profound. When there is no object of habituation. And this is great because like, what are we essentially? Like in a relative sense is just one big knot of habituation. Oh, I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm this, I'm this. So yeah, well, I'm like this. This is the way I think. This is the way I paid a lot of money. This is not true of me, but I paid a lot of money to go get a PhD. This is who I am. This is how I think. I have the branding of that thinking process, right? I've been branded by, X, Y, or Z Ivy League institution. Well, yeah, well, I'm a rebel. Yeah, you could be like that. I'm a rebel. That's the kind of, person I am. Oh, yeah, well, I'm in between. I'm a moderate. And then that's a whole kind of habituation. This process, patterning. Well, I speak this language. Well, I like that food. Just so much stuff, so many ideas, so many labels, so much identity. It's overwhelming. It is absolutely exhausting. Right? When there is no object of habituation, right? That is awakening, right? Unraveling, this process of just letting ourselves unravel. We could be a knot and we're untying. And actually, Naropa used this example for Naropa. He taught, there's one portion of Naropa's biography or Namtar where Naropa is teaching him with symbols. And one of them, he presents him with a snake, right? That is tied in a knot and the snake unties itself, right? And this is a metaphor for the nature of mind, right? The mind has to be able to untie itself. The mind, because it has no essence, naturally unties itself, right? Awakening is the snake untying itself, right? And of course, none of this, then we can take these like instructions to an extreme where then we can say, oh, well, you don't matter. No, nobody matters, and I don't matter, right? And then we end up in like a cold hell, right, of just complete inertia, right? So again, hope and fear, like checking these kinds of binaries. Alas, Naropa goes on, an excellent understanding of worldly phenomenon cannot be permanent. It is like a dream or an illusion, right? So sometimes, again, rooted in hope or fear, or a kind of combination of the both, we try to become masters of worldly phenomena, right? To define. I, like I want to be able to know everything about me, around me, so that I know that essentially that I am safe, right? That this identity, this ego, this self is safe, safely here. Not only safely here, but I know it's here. Thank God this is like this way, right? Whew. I woke up this morning and I know I'm here. That's good. Hopefully I can go to sleep and know I'm going to sleep. Tomorrow I'll wake up and know I'm here. But the truth is all of this is like an illusion, like a dream. And this is what dream yoga and illusory body practice are really powerful practices that kind of help augment this kind of experience, this kind of, wisdom. The objects in dreams and illusions do not exist, Naropa says. Therefore, develop disillusionment and forsake worldly activity, right? So when we say they don't exist, it's not that there's no point necessarily. However, the reality behind it, the intensity, the raison d'etre behind why we do things, right, that is illusory. Again, all of the meaning around, all of the meaning involved in all of this is illusory, right? All of the valence is illusory. Like I did this illusory body retreat in Sikkim in the early 90s. I'm sorry, early 2000s. Gyaltsen Rinpoche was teaching me this practice, and my wife, we weren't married yet. She was coming out to India to visit me, and so I did this retreat, and then I was like, okay, then I'm going to, continue the practice of illusory body, taking this jeep down the mountains to the plains, and hop on a train and take a train to Delhi to go pick her up from the airport, and it was the best train experience I ever had, because it's this process of just letting go into the kind of labellessness of that kind of practice. So anybody who's ridden on trains, like, especially across India, it's like, a lot happens. And a lot less happens when you drop the labels, right? You're just hearing sound, experiencing whatever temperatures, food, people, etc., everything, visual consciousness, etc. There was a long delay, 12-hour delay, right? Not necessarily super unique kind of experience. But I found myself in a waiting room, and then just being in this illusory waiting room filled with illusory people, my illusory self there, just experiencing the movement of color, sound, light, etc. Right? And in the moment of this kind of relationship to phenomenon, the one thing that's not created, right, is reaction. Right? We are not reacting. Why is that beneficial? Because then we're not creating any karma, right? In fact, we're kind of like processing, right? Things are being all, the seeds that would cause our reactivity are actually being liberated and quote unquote processed in our practice, just being that way. Right? So when Naropa says, therefore, develop disillusionment and forsake worldly activity, what he's really saying is like, just rest into the natural spontaneity of appearance. Right? Don't invest. Don't put all your money down on one particular thing, right? Just let it happen. Right? Don't be a smart human. Be a free human. Right? Don't be an educated human. Be a free human. So then he goes on to say, sever all connection with samsara's attachments and aversions. Yeah. So in a lot of the teaching I do, especially with Pure Land Farms, but some here too. Like, I'll lead people through the four thoughts that turn the mind to Dharma, right? And the last of which is the dissatisfactory nature of samsara, right? Or the delusory nature of samsara, perhaps you could say, or the dysfunctional nature of samsara. But right here, what Tilopa is saying, when he says, like, sever all connection with samsara's attachments and aversions, it's a very similar kind of thing. Recognize that the samsaric relationship that we have to, everything, because it's rooted in some kind of, dualistic binary of good or bad, meaning, value, etc., and there being preferences around those. When we're in that space, we will, try and move towards the positive, but it's still in samsara, right? We're still preferencing samsara itself. Sever all connection with samsara's attachments and aversions. This is kind of like the ultimate boundary, like, practice, right? And it's a weird one because, like, rather than, how do you, like, build a boundary around samsara? Well, you liberate it. That's the only way to do it. Right? You can't say, samsara, don't come over here, because, you're still stuck in this binary. Right? The only way to liberate samsara is to just let it go. Just be. Like, I'm not going to invest in you, right? You have nowhere to go. You have nowhere to go. Then he goes on to say, meditate alone in the forests, in mountain hermitage. Dwell in the state that is without meditation. If you attain non-attainment, you attain Mahamudra. Right? So meditate alone in the forests in a mountain hermitage. We could take that literally, which is not bad. But I do think, in these modern times, we can change this up a little bit. But I would say meditate in solitary retreat, definitely. And it could be anywhere. If you live in suburbia, it could be solitary retreat in your suburban home. If you live in a big city like I do, it could be, at home in the big city. If you live in between, do that. But this piece of non-engagement, the solitary part of retreat, I think is really important. Sometimes, like, especially in, like, contemporary Buddhism in the West, we like to do these group retreats, which can be great, but they're also kind of run the risk of being very aggrandizing and, self-propagating, because of, like, look at the clothes I'm showing up. Like, I've got all of the right Dharma clothes, and I spent a lot of money on these. And check out the way I, like, set up my cushion, and then my posture is the best. And then I'm going to process everything with you. I'm going to share all of my feelings and emotions about absolutely everything that arises. Why? Because they're mine, right? And I paid good money to be here because I need to be included. Because one of the reasons why I come here is so that I can feel good about myself. So Tilopa and all these siddhas, this whole point of solitary, like, retreat. Why is that important? Because the first annoying person you meet is yourself, right? The first person who's like, oh, I got a great reason to leave, right? Is yourself, right? There's nobody else who's going to make a reason for you to leave a solitary retreat. Even if somebody's like, I'm on the other side of the door and I'm dying. Even then, if you made a vow to not leave your solitary retreat, it's only you who are causing yourself to leave. Right? So meditate alone in the forests in a mountain hermitage. Yes, we can go do that, and it's wonderful to do that. But really, some element of taking some time to isolate yourself a little bit. And this is where we see sometimes, especially after lots of group practice, like, where are all my neuroses, right? My shadows. Because it's one thing if we're all performing in the same way. When we perform in the same way, and this is part of the problem with like, sorry, group sanghas, is that like, we all, if we're all showing up in the same way, then we're like, hey, I fit in, I belong. This is so great. This is so great. I found my community, right? And yes, like sangha is community, right? But there's so many places where we can fall into these traps that just, it's basically like, a little, you get stuck in an eddy, so to speak, right? And time just goes on. And yeah, this is another reason why it's important to remember the fact that all of us are impermanent and we're going to die, right? To remember this, may I not get stuck in these places of, the wonderful comfort. We all dress the same, we look the same, we speak the same. We often other the rest of the world, or you could be a little bit of a weirdo like all these siddhas and just be by yourself and not do anything as you go out into the world and liberate absolutely every single thought in the appearance. So, and then, this last line, if you attain non-attainment, you attain the Mahamudra, the Great Seal, right? Attain non-attainment. What does that mean? Well, it's not an online certificate, that's for sure. Attain the non-attainment, right, is this relinquishment of seeking, right? Relinquishment of goal, of an ending point. It's really about settling into this deep realization that the only thing that is now, and this is all we can ever be, right? Just being here. But the moment we make it into like a bumper sticker, or a t-shirt, or a mug, or a pin, or a motto, or like a tramp stamp tattoo, or any kind of tattoo, is then we've already started to reify it, and then the toxicity of its dualism has already kind of gotten into our system. And so, this is actually a very kind of, famous. I don't know, famous for people who are into Mahamudra, kind of, portion of the song. But branches and leaves grow from the trunk of a tree. If you sever the single root, 10,000 branches, 100,000 branches, all of them will wither. In the same way, if you cut through the root of mind, the leaves of samsara will wither. Right? Cutting. Resting directly into a non-reactive, open, spacious awareness. Right? When we do this, there's no way for the but. This is like hanging out with kids. But you said we could have dessert today. you said. My son was laughing, he was smiling. So like this bubbling, right? To sit in open, radically spacious, totally free, non-labeling awareness, right? That bubbling can't happen. This is like when you go to a restaurant and they ask if you want still or sparkling water. Right? The sparkling is just reacting, all the bubbles, reacting. The still water is just. And then just as darkness can accumulate for over 1,000 aeons, but one torch will eliminate that mass of darkness. In the same way, one's mind, with one moment of or one instant of luminosity, all of the darkness of the ignorance experienced over lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes dissipates. That's all we need. This is also really important. A kind of nod towards not having a view of slow purification, and in our, kind of unique karmic, well, karma, maybe you could say, being, quote unquote Western, is that, we have this idea of original sin, we have this idea of needing to get clean. We also have like a Protestant work ethic that values hard work, right? And constant work, constant, like working constantly, and even as rebellious as we might want to be about that, right? I'm a real annoying rebel that against that. Oh, yeah, I'm not that way. I'm not that way. But if I'm really like almost always working. This happened where my family was out of town, and I'd been busy with Bob and Dr. Nita, like for this dark retreat thing. But I had one day where the family was still out of town and I had nothing to do. And I literally had to tether myself because I was like, whoa, well, no one's here. This is perfect. Think of all the work I can get done. And then I was like, okay, you have a problem, Justin. Like, you have a problem. Just stop and do nothing. And so I did nothing for 3/4 of a day, which was great. It felt like a vacation, right? But this whole idea of like, we have a problem with original sin. We have a problem with too much work. We have a problem with being kind of like addicted to gradual ways of thinking, right? And so now this idea of just one instant of the experience of luminosity can completely obliterate aeons worth of ignorance takes a little bit of getting used to, right? It's hard to give ourselves permission to let go completely, like let go of all of our ignorance, let it go. Let it go. Usually we're like, we hold on to it, we pathologize it, we pathologize ourselves, like, oh my God, I'm so terrible. Look at how ignorant I am, but here to really just begin to trust into the fact that we can eliminate ignorance, bad karma, and obscurations that have been accumulated for aeons in one open, experience of the nature of mind. So then he goes on to say, hey ho, the phenomenon of the intellect will not see the meaning that transcends the intellect, right? So he's basically like, you are not going to figure this out. Little finger wag, you Naropa, you smart person. Because he was like, he was kind of like the Bob Thurman of the time, right? He's like, no, you're not going to figure this out. You're not. Intellect can't do this. Can't. Right? Created phenomenon will not realize the meaning that is without action. So this poor spray bottle that I use to spray my seeds and plants, you are not going to figure it out. You're not going to realize it for me, right? If one wishes to attain the meaning which transcends the intellect and is without action, cut through the root of the mind and leave your knowledge naked. Cut. Be simple. Be open, openly, be directly passive, right? Just let it all come. Like, cut through the root of mind. All, it's kind of like, I don't know where this comes from, but it's everything that you've learned is wrong about yourself and the world. Everything. All the expensive schooling we've had. Right? The one negative thing about all of this education is that it's all habituation. And it doesn't mean that it's all bad, right? But we need to be mindful of how rigid it makes our thinking and the rigidity it gives our identity, especially after having been educated or have some kind of position. Oh, do you know? Yeah. Do you know who I am? I have a diploma from this place. Lord knows I would not exist if I didn't have this diploma, apparently. Do you know who I am? Are you my mommy? Like, that kid, the kid story. Yeah, exactly. Are you my mommy? Who am I? Cut through the root of the mind and leave your knowledge, direct experience of mind, naked, right? Don't get too smart. Just experience. Allow the water that is stained by thoughts to become clear. So this is good. Often this metaphor of like a muddy puddle or something, or if you take a glass filled with, put some dirt in it and then some water and then stir it up, and then just leave it alone and everything will settle, right? Allow the water that is stained by thoughts to become clear, right? Let everything settle. Do not stop or create appearances. Leave them as they are. Right? So this too, we'll go through our experience of life and we make everything up. Like, oh, it'd be so much better if da, 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 da. Like, oh, this moment is great, but what would make it even better? You're great, but what would make you better? I'm okay, but what would make me better? It's constantly, it's so intense how ingrained we are. Do not stop or create appearances. Leave them as they are. Just leave it alone. Stop fiddling. Right? Stop trying to make it better. Stop trying to make it better. Appearance and existence without elimination or adoption is Mahamudra. Right? Without fiddling, without trying to, turn that frown upside down kind of thing, modulating, shifting. It's all got to be better. It's all got to be better. Like constantly tinkering. Right? It's, basically just chill out, like relax. This is actually a really interesting thing. Somebody should write a paper on whiteness in relationship. Must make it better. I can't leave the thing I just experienced for the first time. I need to make it better because it can't possibly just be, I saw it, I found it, it has to be better. I don't know if anybody here likes Dogman, but this could be better. There could be the next Dogman because we have all of them here. Oh, I stand corrected. There is a new Dogman. We don't have it yet. This grapefruit could be better. Some people find grapefruit bitter. I love it, but some people would say, let's sprinkle a little sugar on it. And others might say, let's trade this for something else, right? So it's all some kind of like, crazy, stupid waste of time. But I mean, in a way, it kind of is, It's just intense. It's really intense. So the universal ground is birthless. So it becomes clear of the veil of obscurations and latencies, right? The universal ground, this vast open spaciousness, the vast, this is where this is like kind of very much aligning with Trekcha, right? This karak purity, like the pure nature or the pure essence of the nature of mind, right? Is birthless, right? So we can't, this is the other way this, undermines whiteness. Like you can't create it. It's done. It's finished, right? It has no, you and your tinkeriness can't make it better. It's been here since timelessness and it wasn't even created, right? Go figure that out. You can't figure it out. Leave it alone. And everything will be experienced with clarity, as luminosity, as fundamental perfection. And don't be proud or calculate, but rest in the unborn essence. So this again, for those group retreats where everyone's like, haha, like we are the chosen, we're the 1% at this Mahamudra, retreat. you know, if only everybody else could be like us. There's pride and the calculation, right? Forget that. Just rest in the unborn essence. It's not owned by anybody. It can't be mined, like Bitcoin. It's constantly present. It could be extracted from every second of the day, right? And not by some corporation, by each one of us, right? It's totally free. Right? That's why they don't want you to have it. I'm just kidding. But maybe, God, what if like, the joy of like absolute bliss could be extracted from every single second of our lives and experienced? I wonder. Yes. Well, appearances are one's own appearance. See them as nothing but mental phenomena. It's everything, it's through the lens of you and I, right? Look at all the different objects around you. Right? They exist, but they're compounded projections, really, essentially, that make the quote unquote meaning. And those compounded projections are thrown onto or pasted onto all of these things by us. Right? And in that way, they're mental phenomena. Right? In this way, we give them. I was kind of looking at this county in upstate New York where land is cheap and a good place to, cheap and beautiful. It's a very Republican county, so I was like looking up the county, and there I was, like being a bad Mahamudra practitioner, like, Republican, 75% Republican, registered Republicans, 25% Democrats. And then that was my labeling, my projection, my samsara. I was like, oh, well, we can't have this here. And I was like, oh, well, maybe we should, for that reason, But it's my own mental lunacy, right? That's just like, here I'm looking at a piece of the earth that has some arbitrary lines that form it. And then there happen to be people who have a particular kind of political view, and I'm judging that piece of earth and whether or not I want to relate to it based on that. I mean, it's completely absurd, right? And we do this all the time. And not just with politics, right? But like, everything. Like there's an eclipse, right? Tonight, I think, right? The eclipse tonight was just supposed to be heavy duty. Some people won't be leaving their homes, Some people will be like, oh, I don't care, and they'll leave their homes, right? Who's right? It doesn't really matter, right? But it just shows how, yes, we're all so obsessed with like Western education and there being some kind of ultimate meaning for things, but we can actually see that in a lot of cases, like there is no real, it's just a bunch of subjective understanding that people have, and we get really intense about it. So let's see, moving on. Total freedom from all extremes is the supreme king of views. So the extremity of good, bad, Democrat, Republican, everything, big, small, high, low, powerful, lacking in power, all of this, right? The freedom from extreme views is the king of views. This is especially hard because whether we like it or not, there are all of these algorithms, it appears, that have been written to cause us to get all hot and bothered about things and use social media platforms, right? This is a really good, it's fascinating. Like, I spent a lot of time thinking about this, especially in relationship to this whole Dalai Lama, tongue thing, where just, watching everybody is like, intense, vitriolic attacks and then vitriolic defenses, right? And then just watching it like, a good meditation session and like, oh, wow, wow. And the anger, right? And some people randomly texting me, like their thoughts on this. Like I needed that, but at least it let me know that I exist, because I was afraid I didn't know that. Freedom from all extremes is the king of views. And so this gets hard, especially for Buddhists, when they're like, Buddhism gets threatened. And like, oh yeah, like I'm real. So again, hope and fear, keeping an eye on hope and fear, and then keeping an eye on all of our, all the ways that we're extremists. Usually other people are extremists. I practice Dharma. I'm not extreme, but boy, just go look at the Facebook, response around the Dalai Lama tongue thing. Like a lot of extreme Buddhists. Freedom from extremes and bias is the supreme king of conduct. So this extension, but the bias piece too. But the bias, we can't draw a line, right? So bias against duality, right? That's the bias. Like, we need to be, if we have a bias, have that bias, right? Free of bias means free of duality. It means free of comparison. Right? This is like also not easily acceptable for a lot of people. Same way, a lot of people can't say when they don't know something, I don't know. Sometimes they're like, "Ooh, if they know I don't know, that's not good for me and my brand. So I'll make a little something up." Just, if we can just stop projecting, stop assigning meaning, stop having bias. Okay. This is the supreme king of conduct. Abiding naturally, free from hope and fear is the supreme result. Abiding naturally, free from hope and fear. Am I doing it right? Yeah, this is an interesting thing to be in my seat and watching people learn to trust themselves in their practice. And it's very natural. I remember, am I doing it right? Someone would give teachings for like 3 weeks on a very simple thing, go off and practice. Oh, wait a minute. I think I'm doing it right. I don't know, and sometimes like we can do that for years, right? And it's fine. Like I think there's a very kind of natural process piece to that. Like, learning how to trust ourselves, learning how to trust the Dharma, learning how to trust phenomena. Because it's believe me, like I totally get how easy it is to say, oh, well, all you need to do is be free of hope and fear, right? And then just like, assume, oh yeah, we could just do that. Sometimes it's, it takes a lot to open up to relinquish hope and fear with respect to visual phenomena. Often it's really, really hard to let go of hope and fear about ourselves. Like this really requires some open, spacious love and caring for ourselves. And not in this kind of like, pat on the head, kind of like, oh, just be kind to yourself way, but really like each one of us can manifest as a Buddha at any time. Care for yourself. Take care of yourself. Be kind to yourself. So then Naropa goes on to say, action is at first like a torrent in a ravine. Right? And so this is in our mind, right? So when we sit and meditate, Right, we sit down, being good meditators. Here we are. Maybe we're a little new to practice. The moment we start, the experience of mind is described as like the torrent in a ravine. And sometimes you can see these, and not just in Tibet, a lot of different kind of locations, but in Tibet, sometimes you'll see these pictures of these, very, very steep mountain, these valleys, like, where the mountains are quite steep and there's a river, right? And it's just like flowing, flowing, flowing. Maybe there was like a glacier, melt off in the summer, and it's just really going, right? And that's the way our mind is sometimes when we sit in the beginning. And I used to experience this all the time, teaching meditation to correction officers, where they'd, get these folks to sit down for a moment, begin to practice meditation, and they experience how much their mind is moving, how intense the thought activity is. Maybe even in a lot of cases, how tired, stressed out, or unhappy, right? And so like easily up to 35%, 35, 30, 35, 27.5% of the meditators would turn around and say, thank you, I'm never doing this again. You made me really uncomfortable. And of course, like, I'm not going to say, oh, I'm sorry I made you uncomfortable, because it's your mind. Like, we're all sitting together, right? And, of course, I take, care to explain that this might happen, right? Recognize how tired we are, recognize how stressed out we are, recognize how hard this week may have been, or what may be happening in our family life that we pour all of our energy into work to not have to deal with, right? This stuff happens, right? So, but in the beginning, right, when we sit down to practice, we experience that, right? There's awareness of the intensity of it all, right? And then in the middle, it moves more slowly, like the Ganges River, right? So it's as if it's a wider river, right? And yes, it has force, right? The Ganges definitely has force, right? But it's not tumultuous in that way, right? So this means we're getting stability in our practice. What does that mean? So stability in our practice in this particular case means, having a sense of familiarization with the way we experience mind, and how mind is also relating to phenomena, right? When there's this kind of, wisdom or knowledge based from actual experience, then the whole thing kind of levels out a bit. And why does it level out? It levels out because we have a very embodied experience of, this is the way my mind works. Right? The big problem is, like, we all think we're special, right? And our mind is pretty predictable, right? So in the beginning, with very little like practice under our belt, yes, at first it is like this violent river. Right? With more experience, and we begin to see, oh yeah, mind. If I don't provoke you, you kind of chill out a bit, right? Okay, good. This is good knowledge, right? Good experience, right? And at the end, it's like the rivers are like a child meeting its mother, is what Naropa says, right? So there's this kind of like joyful ease and natural quality, right? Because this is all assuming, I'll just say this because, we like to bring, this is just like with the Dalai Lama tongue thing, where everybody's like making up like projections about what's going on either side. So here, we're not going to project that. We're going to say this is a good relationship between a mother and child. Right? So assuming it's a good relationship with a mother and child, they come together. Oh, it's so good, right? This is what that experience is like. So I'll just do this next stanza and then we'll pause here. Naropa says, beings with inferior minds do not rest in that state, but hold the breath while disregarding the awareness in the essence. Right. So this is like, it's a little bit of a jab at like pranayama or hatha yoga practitioners, right? Those people are like, breathe, breathe, breathe. Control your breath. Like, if you really want to meditate, control your breath. Stop breathing if you want to be a Buddha. right? And you're just like, what are you doing? You're wrapped up in some other thing, right? So don't do that. And he says, through many aspects of fixing the mind to a way of looking, their awareness does not rest into the true state, but is restrained, right? And so they might be focusing, heavily on their breath, right? And they're not paying attention to awareness, right? This is the thing, just breath, breath, And so this point where he says, through many aspects of fixing the mind to a way of looking, their awareness does not rest in the true state, but is restrained. So if you're focusing on your breath and you're staring, let's say a candle or something, not that there's one right here, there's a candlestick. So staring at something, only mindful of breath, right? That is a form of meditation, but it is not Mahamudra, right? Because all we're doing is we're tethering our focus on two things. One is internal, the other is external. Right? But awareness, and so this is what I'll ask is for a moment, just focus your gaze on something, in your field of visual consciousness, and focus on your breath. It's a very stilling kind of experience, right? Somebody nod. It's like, yeah, okay, thank you, Richard. Stilling, right? So stilling. Now, so that's okay. That's a form of meditation, right? But now, as you do that, feel out your awareness. Let your awareness go in every single direction. That's a different practice, right? Hopefully. Yeah. Stillness is great. And stillness feels good too, right? At least for most people. For a lot of people, it doesn't. When I used to teach meditation on psych floors when I was training as a chaplain, and for people with some, mental health issues, concentrating too much on breath is actually very disturbing. Right? But on average, theoretically, focusing on breath and stilling, focusing on an object feels good. The mind settles. But that is still not the same because we're not addressing the awareness piece. Once we address awareness as well, or not even as well, because you can just focus on awareness. And then begin to get curious. Where is the edge? Is there an edge? Is it like the edge of this box I happen to be in? Okay. Or no, it extends out of the box. It may even extend across 3 times. And that's Mahamudra. So perhaps we can pause here. And then this is great because next week we can begin with the stanza about Karma Mudra. So very sexy. Very good. And nice and controversial. It's a good way to start the next session. So let's pause here. It's super good to see everybody. I hope everybody has a lovely rest of your week. And let's dedicate the merit to all beings. May all beings become completely free of our, blind spots, of course, but free of all of our habituation, free of these ideas of who I think I am and who I think you are, free of good and bad. Oh, what a drag. Free of in between, right? Free of, Democrat, Republican, free of all, free of fixed position. And may all beings truly be free. And may you be free too. So take good care of yourselves. It's so lovely to see you all, and see you soon. Bye-bye.